The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Three spooked girls.
Hey there, I'm Tara.
And I'm Jessica, and together we co-host the podcast Three Spooked Girls.
If you love the paranormal
or murder,
join us on Mondays for full-length episodes where we discuss our favorite paranormal stories and true crime cases.
And join us again on Thursdays for our minisodes called Stabby Snippets, where we tell you all about true crimes happening in the news.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, wherever the hell else you listen to your pods at. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by using the handle @3spookedgirls.
Come and hang out with us and get your spooky on while we scare the hell out of you.
The Three Spooked Girls.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club. I am your host, Jill. I hope that Halloween was great fun this year, and I know I'm having a great time putting pumpkin spice in true crime. And I want to say Happy Veterans Day. I know everyone says this, but I truly do appreciate your service, and I want to shout out to my veteran hubby because you are absolutely remarkable. This is special episode 105, Exonerate, the West Memphis Three. My interview with author and defense attorney Dan Stidham, who we heard all about in my trilogy on his book, A Harvest of Innocence, the untold story of the West Memphis Three murder case, episode 102, 103, and 104. An amazing gentleman. I was lucky enough to meet him and his wife at CrimeCon in 2024 in Nashville this past May. And I could have listened to him discuss his book all day long. So this should be a fascinating interview. So a bit about Dan. He attended Arkansas State University and then pursued his law degree at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, being admitted to the bar in 1998. He was in private practice when he was approached to take on Jessie Misskelley as a client, the West Memphis case erupting on the national scene after the murders of 8-year-old Chris Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch in 1993. Beyond the West Memphis Three case, Dan has accumulated a wide range of litigation experience and is a frequent speaker on college campuses and professional conferences across the country, addressing the West Memphis Three case, of course, false confession, and wrongful conviction issues. Still living in Paragould, Arkansas, Dan enjoys reading forensic science, I know we're all shocked, psychology, sociology, political science, and philosophy. And he can be sometimes found pursuing his passion for the ocean and offshore fishing. So let's get to it. Dan Stidham, I would like to welcome you to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am so honored to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
I love doing these interviews. Thank you for having me. And then nice to meet you again for the second time.
Yes, I was just going to say, I recall meeting you at CrimeCon and meeting your lovely wife and looking at your book then and thinking it was just marvelous. And I finally worked my way through literally my murder shelf and got to it. So I'm really glad that you're able to do this.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it.
So I'm going to start kind of backwards, but in your book, you said you started writing the book in 2015 and it's published in 2023. There has to be a story there.
There is. And I actually started journaling and keeping up with things in my file through the appellate process. And when the Alford plea occurred in 2011, August 19th, 2011, which I was not the architect of. In fact, I didn't even know what was happening until the night before. I got a courtesy call. I knew that I was going to write a book 31 years ago. almost 32 years ago now. And so I kept very accurate notes and started a draft. And in 2011, after the Alford pleas and they were released, I sought out some help from a friend of a friend. And then we became friends, and she decided to work on the West Memphis case as her doctoral thesis at Arkansas State University. And so she and I would sit around in my study, and I would be the storyteller and she would be the writer. And so she started the initial framework, and we got 100 pages that I thought were good. Turned out none of the agents in New York City seemed to think they were. And they suggested that I hire a ghostwriter or an editor to assist me. And so in 2014, I retained the services of Tom McCarthy, and I again played the role of storyteller, and he was the writer. And I would send him chapters, and he would make suggestions and send them back, and then I would accept them or not. And that started in June of 2014. And of course, life has its interruptions, but the biggest concern that I had was part of the Alford plea was a 10-year suspended imposition of sentence for the West Memphis Three. So if they got in any further trouble, or I shouldn't use the word further because they never did get in trouble. It was all a well-told campfire story is the best way it's been described. I just didn't want to put a target on their back by printing it too soon. So we got the first draft done in probably the next year, June of 2015. And it was over 500 pages, way over what it needed to be, even though I thought it was a great story. And I'll probably end up someday, I'm running out of time this year, like I did last year, but things have been too busy. But I want to make a copy of that original to give to my kids as a keepsake, so to speak. I wanted to get past that 10 years so that I wouldn't put a target on any of their backs.
I really appreciate that, given what went on, the legal shenanigans that went on. But do you think that they could have had a bigger target anyway? Could you really have contributed to that?
Well, yeah, because Mr. Misskelley went right back to the same trailer park that they plucked him out of in 1993. And because that's where his dad lived, and they lived in utter poverty and still did in 2011. And now Mr. Misskelley still resides in West Memphis. And they did bother him a little bit with some charges that were legitimate, but they were traffic charges, and they put him in jail just because he was Jessie Misskelley Jr. And when I found out about it, I wasn't very happy.
Oh my God.
I went to visit the clerk to figure out what it was going to take to get him out of jail. And then I made a interesting Facebook post, and then 20 minutes later, people from all around the world had paid his fines. And this also let law enforcement know over there that they're being watched worldwide. So if they want to mess with Mr. Misskelley, they better have a good reason to do that. But I didn't want to make it worse on him. He's got a terrible enough life as it is with the poverty and his mental disabilities. I just didn't want to make it any worse. So there were a couple of things that kept us from meeting that 10-year deadline a little bit sooner than we did. The most important of which is I lost a son who was only 34 years old. He died in his sleep. He was an anti-vaxxer, and he had COVID and just went to sleep and didn't wake up. And surprisingly, he had moderate heart disease. That threw me for a loop, as you might imagine, just as we were getting ready to publish. And so I had to take some time off work and get my head on straight. And then my wife lost her second oldest child to breast cancer. So both my parents are terminally ill, and we've been dealing with that for the last 6 years or so. So we've had a lot of personal issues that prevented us from crossing the finish line. And then in 2016, Judge Burnett thought it would be fun, as did others that worked on the case, if I had an opponent for the first time. And so I had to take about 9 months, 10 months off to deal with campaigning and we won 61-39, which in a judicial race is pretty much a slam dunk. So, but it did take me away from finishing the book as fast as I wanted to. It just so happened that at the end of the year, after much negotiation, because by the end of all this time, once we started in 2014, I had become a much better writer because I was watching one of the best in Tom McCarthy, who's an excellent writer. He's written several bestsellers as a ghostwriter for celebrities and other folks, and that's why I was interested in hiring him. But he's retired from the book business, and the book business ain't the same book business it was back when he was there. Now it's everything's digital. And, the publishing companies only seem to be interested in the tell-all books about politics or something of that nature. So we chopped around for about 18 months, and I finally said, Tom, let's just go self-publish this thing, put it on Amazon. The goal has never been to make money. I don't care if I make any money or not. Frankly, I just wanted there to be an accurate rendition of what really happened in this horrible, horrible case of 3 8-year-old kids being murdered and the horrible wrongful convictions of 3 teenagers, one who was sitting on death row. I finally persuaded him into doing that, and we were ready. Last November, we published, I think it was November 4th. We've got a hardback copy now and an ebook, and hopefully by November 1st, we'll have our audiobook ready to go.
That's a journey.
It's been a long journey. Actually, I was thinking the other day, I spent the first of my life, my life was just pretty boring, I guess. And then the second half of my life has been constant struggle and trying to correct a wrong. And of course, I made a promise to Mr. Misskelley after he was convicted. Fortunately, we dodged the death penalty in all 3 murder cases. He was convicted on 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder, which is the lowest the judge would let us do a jury instruction for. So I think we did all right, despite the craziness the judge pulled on not letting our world-class experts testify. He knew if they did, we would win, and that's why he refused to let them testify. At least that's my opinion.
I share that opinion, and I hope the man never listens to my podcast because he is not going to get along well with me.
You're not the only person.
Yeah.
And the strange thing, and I probably shouldn't say this without knocking on wood, and I'm too tired to get up and walk over to my barrister's case, but
I got you.
I really thought that this book was going to bring me a lot of grief because during since the Alford pleas, essentially, the day I announced that I was writing the book in 2012, my local newspaper, the Paragould Daily Press, did a front page article about the case, and that very day my mailbox got blown up with a small bomb. And that was the second time that's happened. And so I expected to get a lot of grief over the book, but to my surprise, other than one idiot from Pennsylvania, which I understand that's where you're from, sent me emails incessantly, even though he says he's never going to send them anymore. With a little online investigation of my own, I was able to determine where he lives, where he works, his phone number, his name, his wife's names, his kids' names. And if he bothers me again, I'm just going to send the cops over to his house.
You're more than fair.
Well, I try to be. That's my job, is to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think I was fair in the book. I was as hard on myself as I was anyone else. A lot of people may not feel that way that were in the book, but I called it like it was, and I called it like it happened, and I lived it. It's my story. It's not a retelling of the case in its entirety. That would, be 1,000 pages long. And it took me a while to convince Tom to do this too, but I had a friend in Hollywood who suggested that I might want to look at a non-linear narrative as the way to tell the story. And I thought, what do you mean? First of all, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's like the Titanic, the movie Titanic. And I said, I didn't want to go see that movie because I knew the boat was going to sink. But in the movie, they used the backdrop of the Titanic sinking after hitting the iceberg as the backdrop for the human story of some of the passengers, which I assume were fiction. And it was a great movie. I enjoyed it. And the third season of True Detectives was filmed in Northwest Arkansas, and it had a lot of similarities to the West Memphis case from Northeast Arkansas.
Oh, I did not know that.
And it was told in the same fashion. The older police officers were telling their story about being young and investigating the case. I thought it was a fantastic way. Another example is the movie Lincoln. We all knew he was going to die at the end of the movie. He was going to get shot in Ford's Theater, but I was just gravitated to the movie, and I even found myself, and it scared me a little bit after I realized I was doing it, but I kept saying, get out of bed, we need you, don't die. And I was like, no, he's dead, he's already dead. So, but that's good
storytelling.
Yes, it's a great way to tell a story, especially one like mine. So I don't stay in chronological order, and because that's the way the first draft we did that. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and it's more interesting, I think, to the reader to not stick to that chronological telling.
It was interesting for me to learn something about you, because I'm going to be learning about this through your eyes and your experience. So it was important to me to figure out who's this man, this little boy standing on the tree stump, giving his closing arguments. That was important. So I was really glad to have that. And then later you diverge and you're talking about your family and the impact on your family and your emotional health and all of these things going on. Not that you weren't humanized, but it added that extra layer of icing on top of it to really have a sense of where you're coming from and your outrage. I mean, I just was annoyed the whole time reading the book, except in those beginning, those cheerful young child ages, annoyed and frustrated and outraged.
Well, I had a friend who I sent the book to, and she read it, and she said it was like reliving the entire thing through my eyes. So I thought that was a great compliment, and you've said the same thing. I appreciate that. Believe it or not, I was not ready to do that at all until the chapter I talked about going to Baltimore and speaking to the kids there in high school. I speak everywhere across the country, anybody who will invite me, because it's not just this case is horrible. We need to reform our criminal justice system top to bottom, and there's a few things we can do real quick and real easy to solve a lot of that. That kid at Catonsville High School asked me that question, and kids don't have filters like adults. And she said, how has this case affected you personally? And of course, I immediately deflected. I'd never been asked that question before, and I deflected it because I wasn't prepared to talk about things like post-traumatic stress and nightmares and things of that nature. I don't consider myself a macho or a tough guy, but I was always afraid that it would make me look weak. But when we got back to Memphis from Baltimore, my wife and I stopped at the crime scene, and I realized that it was time to tell the whole story, not just part of it. And I thought that people might be interested in my travails, which are pale in comparison to what a lot of the other people involved in the case have been through. Now that I've lost a child, I certainly understand losing a child better than I did before. But he wasn't 8 years old, he was 34 years old. And you never want to lose a child. That's not a club you want to be in, but I understand it better now. And in fact, after Chris passed away 3 years ago, it'll be 3 years ago this week. And I felt it was important for me to go back and pour the entire book through the filter of losing a child, because I thought, I want to make sure that I am graceful and can express my loss in a way that I recognize their loss as well for those 3 8-year-old kids and their parents. So I did. I poured it back to the filter, made a few changes, because unless it's happened to you, you don't know what it feels like, and you can't explain it to anyone. And I always liked it when people would walk up to me and say, I understand what you're going through. No, you don't. You never lost a child. You don't understand anything. And I know they're trying to be nice and helpful, and I'm not criticizing them. It's just a fact that you don't know what that feels like until it happens, and hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody else. But of course it will. So it took me a while to open up completely. And when I did, Tom was delighted, because he said, this really shows the personal side of you and your story. And that's very, very important for the reader. And it gives you credibility. Not only are you criticizing yourself for being young and inexperienced, you're also sharing your demons with your readers. And so that's very important.
It's being very human. First, I am terribly, terribly sorry for your loss, for you and Leanne.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that so much. Get used to it. That's all you can do, is keep moving. And Chris would have wanted me to do that. And I stumbled, but when I got back up and brushed myself off like I always do when I fall, I get right back up and get after it. And so I still have the same thought process with this case. I've got a potential suspect, and of course, with the new testing that the Supreme Court is allowing, back in April, they agreed that Damien Echols' teams could retest some of the items, and that's going on. The process of negotiating what's going to be tested and where it's going to be tested, because you don't want to send it to a below average lab. It needs to be
I have a couple suggestions for labs I would want you to look into, just from past cases that I've worked on. We can talk about that after.
Okay.
But is there anything that we can do to move that ahead faster? It's been since April. We're in October. I wouldn't want to start a protest, free the DNA. But if there's something that is actually helpful, that is not going to get hackles up and people to become dug in on positions. And you said they're trying to negotiate. Negotiations are very, very difficult. I did negotiations at work for 25 years. It's the most thankless job in the world there is. But is there something helpful that we, just people out here in the public, can do to let them know we are still watching? The clock is running. What are y'all doing with that?
I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom.
And I'm Kristlyn, I'm the daughter.
And together we are Family Plot.
The Family Plot Podcast, a show where we discuss history,
Folklore,
true crime, and the paranormal.
minus all the oogie bits. We are PG-13.
I'm almost 15 now.
Don't ruin the commercial.
Do catch us looking into special topics like
The origins of fairy tales.
Sherlock Holmes.
and the trial of Dr. Hyde and Mr. Swope.
Find out who Dad Man Crush is.
Or what happens in Krista's Corner.
But behave, you two!
So come be a part of the fam.
Available on Google, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Family Plot Podcast. Bye!
Well, there's really not anything practical that can be done, because the problem is the lawyers who are negotiating this all have other clients to deal with, and they all have to make a living. And we have a new prosecutor, and I think she's doing a very good job of managing that, at least from what I've been told. This may sound crazy, but whoever you believe in or whatever you believe in, pray. That's what we need. I would love so much. I've already kept one promise, and I made another promise to Mark Byers, who unfortunately passed away in a car accident a few years ago. But Pam Hobbs, I promised her I'd find the real killer, and I thought I was going to be done with this mess after the offered plea, because I kept my promise to my client. I didn't like the offered plea after I learned about it, but it's Let me give you an example of, and it's in my book, but I probably didn't stress it as much as I should have. After stalking Michael Bodden at a meeting, I cornered him in an elevator with a couple of other forensic experts, and by the time we got to my floor, they all agreed to come to my hotel room and look at my file and the photographs that I brought. And these are the worst photographs you can imagine. I used to, when I was working on the case, every minute of the day, I used to spread them out on my counsel table in my library at the office and eat a pepperoni pizza, and it didn't bother me at all. But now, as soon as it's over, now I can't stand to even look at them. I came across them the other day looking for something else, and it just sent chills down my spine. But Dr. Bodden and the other expert, the forensic entomologist, they looked at the pictures, and the first thing Bodden said is, I've done 10,000 autopsies, and I've never seen anything this bad or horrific. And the second thing he said was immediately this is animal predation. This is not a satanic ritual. And that was in 1998, in February of 1998. And they weren't released from prison until August 19th, 2011. So that's how slow the judicial process works. And our experts came to their conclusions in 2007, but it still took 4 more years for the wheels to fall off the state's case completely and them take the cowardly way out. If you just plead guilty to a lesser offense, we'll let you go home. And it's not very often that you see someone walk off death row or life in prison, for that matter. So the old saying about the wheels of justice turn slowly is very, very true. And it's very unfortunate, because they didn't deserve to be in there for 5 minutes, much less 18 years and 78 days. So it was very frustrating. So I understand your frustrating and your listeners' frustrations as well, and the public's. We deserve to know. We've got 2007 was a long time ago, and technology's changed dramatically. It changes in the DNA field like every 6 months. So we've got an actual chance of finding out who this is. And also, we've already excluded the West Memphis Three, so all I need is a full DNA profile to work with, and then I can exclude or include my suspect, who is a long-haul serial killer truck driver roaming the interstate highways. And also, I'm not ready to take Mr. Hobbs, the stepfather of Stevie Branch, off the list of suspects either. We've got a partial DNA from him in 2007. If we can enhance that, then we may have that problem solved. The issue then becomes, and I'm not sure how this would go, it depends a lot on the prosecutor and in the AG's office, but if we do get a match, of course they're going to say what Terry Hobbs has always said, well, it was secondary transfer. Those kids were in my house all the time playing. But how did it end up in a knot binding one of the victims?
Yeah, exactly.
Where it was found is more important than the fact that it was found. And the person who was with him, we got a 100% solid hit back on him, so we can prove that he was at the crime scene, no question about it. And since the book's been released, you wouldn't believe the phone calls and the emails that I get. Most of them are kind of Looney Tunes, but I had a guy who was sounded very convincing until he told me that the person who killed the 3 kids in the West Memphis case was a Zodiac killer. That's when I lost interest in his story.
Oh my.
so then I had another guy who emailed me and said that he had figured out who Mr. Bojangles was, and gave me the name and address of this person. And he said, you can prove it by the fingerprints on the bloody sunglasses. And I thought, if you don't know that those were thrown away because the police told the restaurant manager to throw them away, then you probably don't know who Mr. Bojangles is.
Yeah, really.
So I do want to solve this case before I pass away, and I want to bring closure to the families. 2 of the 3 families ended up on our team there towards the end. And the other negative post on Amazon for a review was from Michael Moore's father, who was not very nice, but I get it, I understand it. I know what he's going through. I've been through it myself, not in the same fashion, but understand, and that's okay. If we can find the real killer, then I think that would be a huge blessing and a huge resolution to the case. The issue then becomes, it's an issue I don't want to worry about until we get there or waste any mental energy trying to see how this would work, but we would have to get the court and the state to issue orders stating or judgments stating that the West Memphis Three are completely, totally exonerated and innocent.
Vacate the guilty pleas.
And then that might erase them from not having to pay reparations. So that's another issue that's, and the state does not want to pay anybody anything, I can tell you that. But how could they not pursue the real killer if the evidence is right in front of them? So at some point, you have to trust people to do the right thing. And then if they don't, you write a book about it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes that's the way it works. With my client safely out of prison, I had the luxury of time to complete the book, and I wanted to get past that April 19th hurdle of 2021. And then we, like I said, all those other things that happened in life happened. But every time I do a book signing somewhere, someone will give me new information. Did you know this or that or the other? And I said, no. Why didn't you call me 18 years ago? And one of the people was the guy that owned the wrestling ring in Dias, Arkansas, where Jessie was that night. And that's in the book, but also had someone who was with him when he made the phone call, was his caretaker before he passed. And he said a prosecutor named Davis, he remembers, told him to get out of town so we couldn't subpoena him. And there was a lot of that going on. Of course, you read the book, so you know that.
Yeah.
But I just put one foot forward, and during the process of the appeals, and, it's one thing for the Supreme Court to affirm a conviction, but it's another thing entirely for them to completely ignore an issue that would have set Mr. Misskelley free and throw me under the bus in the process by saying I didn't raise the issue in a timely fashion when I had a written brief in motion.
Rule 2.3.
I drafted the order that said Judge Burnett had considered it in his ruling. So how could I have not raised it? And the prosecutors never filed a response. And then somebody called me while I was writing the book and said, you need to go read Justice Corbin's interview that's on the Administrative Office of the Court website. And I thought, okay. And it took me about 6 months to do it, but I finally did it. And I thought, wow, this guy is actually apologizing. A member of the Arkansas Supreme Court is apologizing for ruining these kids' lives. So it just affirmed in everything that I say in my book. I can't believe they made me do it. And I don't understand who they were. And of course, he passed away before I found out about the oral history project that they had done. So pretty soon I'll have enough information to do a second edition.
Well, I did a little compare-contrast from what Justice Corbin had to say versus Judge Burnett. Because afterwards, after the plea was accepted, he eventually spoke on that and was like, hey, the Arkansas Supreme Court upheld everything I did. I didn't find them guilty. It was a jury. I'm pristine and wonderful. And I had a few choice words about my thinking on that perspective versus here's an Arkansas Supreme Court justice who had the common decency to take the long view and go, wow, this didn't work out the way I wanted it to work out at all. This was wrong.
And Judge Burnett did get reversed, and that's how we got where we ended up with the Alford plea. They reversed Judge Burnett.
He said that he wasn't happy with the Alford plea because they should have gotten new trials.
They didn't want new trials because the world would have seen just how bad this really was. You talk about HBO making some more documentaries, that would have happened in a heartbeat. And they hid behind this Alford plea so they could walk away claiming victory. And we walked away claiming innocence, but we ended up having to live with a felony conviction on these kids for the rest of their lives. Jason wants to go to law school, and he can, but he won't be able to practice because he's got a felony conviction.
Right.
And I've said this a million times, it's getting old, but the governor who will pardon the West Memphis Three is probably in junior high or maybe even a sophomore in high school right now.
And probably listens to my podcast.
I hope so.
Oh, but listen, you mentioned this like on the open, that there are reforms that can be implemented to help in situations like this. God forbid, I know there's more of them. I know there are.
This doesn't just happen in Arkansas. It happens across the country every day. And I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
I want to help be a voice for reforms and give people a specific target figure to.
In 1993, there were 2 states that required the full recordation of any and all interrogations of a suspect. 2 out of 50. Now, the last time I checked and researched it, there was almost 20. And, in Arkansas, what they did in the wake of the Misskelley conviction and the West Memphis case is they gradually eroded 2.3 to now it has actually no meaning whatsoever.
Oh my God.
Because they don't ever want to get caught in that position again where I had them by the throat and they just said I didn't raise it. When an appellate court says you didn't raise an issue and you did, and you point them to the exact page number in the record where you did, that's dodging the issue, and no appellate court should do that.
No.
So, but they did, and in the process, they threw me under the bus. But when they threw me under the bus, they also cast in stone the ineffective assistance of counsel claim because they said we didn't raise the issue. And had we raised it, and we did, but they say we didn't, so it's forever written in stone that we didn't. That means we were automatically 110% ineffective in assisting our client because they said we didn't raise the issue.
Right.
That's why after my testimony and the testimony of the forensic experts, that's when things started happening. It's not a coincidence that once Judge Burnett became Senator Burnett, the kids were out of prison in a matter of months. But in our system, which I think is not correct, ineffective assistance of counsel claim, also referred to as an IAC claim. In Arkansas, the law is that the judge who presided over the case is the best person to judge the lawyer's performance at trial. And I can see the rationale behind that, but at the same time, who's going to judge the judge? And of course, you can say the Arkansas Supreme Court was supposed to do that, but I can't remember the exact language that the judge used, but I know how much it must have bothered him. He probably had nightmares for weeks, telling everybody that I was the greatest lawyer that ever walked the planet, so that my client couldn't prevail, even though the Supreme Court said I was ineffective. It is what it is, but it ain't over yet. As long as I'm breathing, we're going to keep turning over rocks until we find who did this. And I think they're still alive. I saw an exoneration the other day through the use of genealogical DNA, which is a new thing that wasn't in existence, I don't think, in 2007. They figured out who actually, I think it was a rape case, exonerated someone, or actually there wasn't an exoneration. They just figured out who did it. So that gave the family and the victim some closure. Turns out lived right around the corner down the street. So we can do a lot of things now that scientifically we couldn't in 1993. 1993, DNA was in its infancy. And the prosecutors were still using junk science like matching hairs and fibers, which means nothing more than a blonde hair looks like a blonde hair, or a red fiber looks like a red fiber. It has no evidentiary impact whatsoever. Sounds good. It makes the jury have something to be able to hang their hat on, but it's scientifically, it's nonsense. Fortunately, prosecutors are not using that anymore. Forensic odontology is also fallen out of grace. We thought we had a good case of that at one point, but now that has fallen into the same kind of junk science that hair and fiber evidence has. So even though it's been 32 years, still got a shot at this, a good shot at it. This case has never left the news in 32 years. It'll be 32 years on May 5th, which is the worst day of the year for me. It brings back such bad memories, insults my post-traumatic stress somewhat, but we got a shot. We really do. Nothing would make me happier. And if Judge Burnett thinks that they deserved a new trial, that's probably the only thing that he and I will ever agree on.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't he the one who actually had the power to enact that? I think he could recognize the errors that had been made, and he chose not to, because he was on his own vendetta instead of being the impartial magistrate, as you write in the book. He was anything but. Oh my God, my face was, it's bright red. My husband said, "You have to stop reading now. You're going to hurt yourself." I just got, I understand.
It's a tough read. I've had people tell me that they laughed and that they cried, and I had one colleague call me and she said, "I can't quit crying. I've just finished the book and I just can't quit crying." And I've shed a few tears myself over all this. There were days after the Arkansas Supreme Court denied our direct appeal that I really questioned whether I wanted to be a lawyer or not, because I didn't want to be a part of something that was not justice and not fair. And that's why I went to law school, was to ensure justice, the truth. That's what a trial is supposed to be, is a search for the truth. And that's what a prosecutor is supposed to do, is search for the truth, not hide witnesses in other states or ask them to disappear so they can't be subpoenaed, not meet with your client behind your back without you knowing it. All these things should have never, ever happened. But winning so far ahead of the truth, it's just...
But that's not winning. That's losing. Putting innocent people in jail and letting a murderer run free is not a win. And newsflash, you work for me. Me, the people who you're supposed to be protecting. It is a flat out loss. The prosecution had to tip, where they said, okay, here's the evidence. It's shaky. That's why they wanted Jessie to testify at Damien and Jason's trials. He said it was an 11. Then he talks later to the parents and he says it's a 50-50 case. Going in. Mind is blown. You're going into a death penalty trial thinking it's 50-50? I lost my mind. At some point over the years, it had to have tipped where they knew.
Some cases they were afraid they were going to get prosecuted.
I know there's prosecutorial immunity. And I'm like, we need some reforms here. But when you're starting to literally make up stuff and hiding witnesses, you crossed the line for me, bud.
That is, yes, that's way beyond the line. And, you know, I've been involved in cases and I've seen cases, actually know of a case who I think was one of the best circuit judges we've ever had. She's now an appellate judge on the Arkansas Court of Appeals, but there was a child sexual abuse case, and at the last minute, some witnesses didn't appear, or they changed their stories. And sometimes the victim is too embarrassed or doesn't want to relive that event. And so the local paper jumped all over this judge and was talking about what a horrible person she was. And the reporter had no idea what the hell he was talking about. And of course, the bar circled and defended her. Of course, it was the prosecutor whose case fell apart, but she accepted the plea. And so that's who they focused on, the media. So things do happen. And of course, lawyers and judges can't talk about that for ethical reasons. So if somebody reads a newspaper, they think that judge ought to be hung because he or she let that person go, or only got probation, or only got 2 years, or only got whatever. But they don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, and no one's allowed to talk about that. So it's kind of a bit of both. But in our case, in the West Memphis case, it was open and notorious how bad the prosecutorial misconduct was. And for them to offer Jason Baldwin on the eve of his trial 5 years, which would have amounted to time served, and he still wouldn't testify against Echols.
That blew me away.
There's never been a single documented case of satanic ritualistic homicide ever on the planet. Nowhere has anybody ever discovered one. It's all hocus pocus. This was a mass hysteria event. I have an interview on Friday with Christianity Today, and I was a little bit surprised that they wanted to interview me. They are interested in how Christians, because that's their name, Christianity Today, and how people can get caught up in these strange myths. And God, I'm so thankful that Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet in 1993, because I can't imagine going through all what we did. It was bad enough with local media going out and making stuff up, doing the things that they did, none of whom have asked for an interview, by the way. Not that I expected one, but it's just the kid went to the police station with the officer. The officer didn't advise him of his 2.3 rights. In fact, he told him, if you can help us out, there's $35,000 for you. Yeah. He was there all day, and yet we've got 34 minutes of an audio tape. And so what happened during the rest of the time? There's very few notes that the officers made, so we don't know what happened. We can guess, and with great probability, exactly what happened. They were badgering him to say and repeat what they wanted him to say. And imagine when they finally turn the tape recorder on and he gets everything wrong still. But I have just discovered something that I did not know. I heard someone talking about this the other day. I just assumed that it was a deputy prosecutor that came over and read the transcript for the statement. It was actually the local judge refused to issue the warrants because it couldn't happen the way Mr. Misskelley said it did. So police had to go back in and do that second subsequent 12-minute long interview. And the first thing Gary Gitchell says is, now, Jessie, you told me earlier this happened at 6 or 7. Was it 6 or 7 or 7 or 8? And even someone who's mentally retarded, that's the jargon that was in use back in 93. It's more tenderly referred to as MR today. Even he knew what the officer wanted him to say, because he thought, once I get done telling them what they want me to tell them, I get to go home. So instead of letting him go home, they locked him up for 18 years and 78 days. But why not use the video camera? They had one. They interviewed other witnesses and other people with the video, and the polygrapher told him he was lying his ass off. He didn't. The only question he flunked is, have you ever done drugs? Which had nothing to do with the murders. It's just that they ought to be ashamed of themselves for taking advantage of a mentally handicapped kid. But they'll stand behind that Alford plea for the rest of their lives to bolster their careers. And I just couldn't stand the idea of the real story not coming out. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled you wrote the book. And listen, they can stand behind that Alford plea all they want. I see them. I see what they did.
Tooth and nail they fought me. Even when they realized at the end of the evidentiary hearings that we had just blown their case out of the water, they still wouldn't give up. They still wouldn't say, you know what, we're going to let these kids go and we're going to set aside their convictions and we're going to pay them reparations. That would have been the right thing to do. But they did it the wrong way. They did it cowardly. They said, if you'll plead guilty, we'll let you go home. Well, why was that necessary when they didn't have a case? Mm-hmm. So if you go to a mentally handicapped kid and say, hey, if you just repeat this, you go home today. And me, myself, after sitting in a cell for 18 years and 78 days, I might say the cow jumped over the moon and it's made out of cheese just to go home and see my parents and my kids and whatever. Who could turn something like that down? Yeah. We can lament about it, years later, but it happened. It is what it is, and now we're trying to fix it.
Yes.
So instead of free the West Memphis Three, it's exonerate the West Memphis Three.
Yes.
That's the battle cry now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for doing this.
Well, I enjoyed it. It was a great conversation.
Awesome conversation. I like having conversations. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you did not get into the book? You said it was 500 pages that you want to tell me about right now.
There were so many things. Maybe the fact that the prosecutors had in their possession Mark Byers' knife that he gave the cameraman for HBO. They didn't bother to tell us about that until we found out about it from HBO. The HBO documentary guys told us, but they never mentioned it to us until we got back ready to go to trial after the winter storm had come through. Here, when there's any chance of snow or ice, everybody's paralyzed. Nobody knows how to drive on it. All the milk and bread disappears from the stores.
Oh, we do that in Pennsylvania too, but we can drive on snow. But all the milk and the bread, the eggs, gone.
Well, we had a few bad winters, and I bought a Jeep so I would be able to get back and forth to court. And since I bought the Jeep, it's not been too bad. We had maybe a week of cold weather, 2 weeks. It actually got down to 1 degree, and I've never seen it get that cold in Arkansas before. Luckily, we had a fireplace. But we both digress.
No, we do, slightly. Listen, I really do appreciate this. I do the 3 episodes on the book. I don't tell them everything. I don't tell them all the good stuff. They have to read the book if they want the good stuff. But it really does help to hear from the person, in this case, who is living this story. So I appreciate your time and your effort in coming on and talking to me and my murder bookies.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed every minute of our conversation, and who knows, maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, if there's a break in the case and we hear something on that DNA or anything else, you'll be getting an email. Dan! Come back and visit again.
I hope that happens. I really do.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care now. And this concludes episode 105, Exonerate the West Memphis Three, my interview with Dan Stidham, co-author of A Harvest of Innocence, the untold story of the West Memphis Three murder case, which you simply have to read. Thank you for listening, murder bookies. We can hope that this new DNA testing will shine the light of truth on the case, revealing the true killer who should face justice, rooted in facts, forensic science, and evidence, not suspicion and rumor. Hopefully that'll be happening, and hopefully soon. Keep the prayers coming. And our next book is Silent Silhouette, Who Killed Deborah Sue and Why? By George Jarrett and Jennifer Buchholz, episode 106, which is going to drop in 2 weeks. I've had a number of bonus content interviews dropping recently, so make sure that you're subscribed so that you do not miss a thing. And now I have that Aerosmith song in my head. Anyway, Silent Silhouette, Who Killed Deborah Sue and Why? Begins in 1975. Newlywed Deborah Sue Williams is living in Lubbock, Texas, and one night while her husband was away at work, she is brutally stabbed 17 times in the carport of their home. Now, many suspects were investigated, including serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, but no one was charged and the case went cold. Enter investigative journalist George Gerard, who teamed up with friend and former Army counterintelligence officer and university professor Jennifer Buchholz to study this case and find a killer. Now, along the way, they created a massive team of citizen detectives that have brought resources to bear on heating up a 50-year-old cold case. This is a remarkable story of perseverance, advocacy, and the relentless demand for justice. So engaging, even for this storyteller. Thank you for listening. Always trust your gut. Introduce some friends and family to the Murder Shelf Book Club. And please take a few minutes to leave an awesome review that'll help me make new murder bookies. Share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com, on X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or you can join Patreon for $4 a month and help pick out our books, among other things. Enjoy the crisp fall weather, pumpkin spice, and the gorgeous leaves changing.
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Amber. And we're Witches Talking Tarot.
And we're bringing you all things occult.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, twice a week for your magical pleasure.
Join us as we dive into aliens,
cryptids, the Illuminati.
Super in the natural.
Because that's the kind of witches we are. So join these high energy witches twice a week. Come sit a spell and see why we'll be your favorites.
Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.